Todd Dunn here on February 4. What I wanted to talk about today is along the lines of the little financial presentation in my last video, and that is $1 million. Is it enough to retire on? Clearly, since a lot of people do manage to retire and they don't have $1 million in savings, it is possible to retire without $1 million. But the question is $1 million enough to have a comfortable retirement in which you don't worry about money? Now, this is a question that I'm never going to have to worry about. I'm sure most of you won't, but I'm asking it because of a couple of reasons. First off, when I was a kid, the idea of $1 million was just impossible to grasp. If you had $1 million, you were rich, 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 rich. However, now, that doesn't seem to be the case so much anymore. And you see a lot of financial advice around about how before you retire, you should make sure you top up your 401k and your other savings to, at least $1 million. Of course, this is impossible for many people. So, anyway, this is just kind of a mental exercise, if you will, a kind of fun question to look at. It'll also illustrate my thinking on retirement in general. So let's talk about it a little bit and see where it leads us. So $1 million. What can you do with $1 million? How long will it last? Well, the first question you have to answer when you're planning your retirement and deciding how much money you need to maintain your lifestyle is the obvious question. How long am I going to live in retirement? In other words, how long am I going to live? If you're going to retire at 65, which will be my assumption for this, and you're only going to live to 75, well, $1 million, in the simplest case, where you just take out 10% of it every year for 10 years and it's gone, would give you $100,000 a year. Ooh, there's surf. We'll stop out here and look at it while we continue. So that $1 million, might be enough to have a fairly comfortable retirement. But if you live 40 years to 105, and a few people manage that, that $1 million is going to be stretched pretty thin because you could only take out 1/40th or 2.5% of it a year. Let's get up here where we can get a nice view of the surf. It's a little lumpy right here on the rocks, but there we go. We'll look out over the ocean while I'm talking. So as I said, if you lived to 105 or 40 years after you retired, that $1 million might not go that far, because if you didn't have any return on it, and just $1 million that you were gradually depleting, you could only take out 1/40th of it every year. And 1/40th of $1 million is 2.5%, or $25,000 a year. That would not give you a particularly comfortable retirement if that's all you had to live on. $25,000 a year, although when I went out on my own, was big money and would provide a very comfortable lifestyle, won't quite do it anymore. But there are some realities to having money put away, your $1 million put away, that I haven't considered yet. And there are some other realities of how much money do you need to live on that I haven't considered. Now let's look at a couple of those. First off, you are not just going to have $1 million under your mattress or buried in coffee cans in the yard that you periodically dig up and spend some of the money. What you're going to do is you're going to have that money somewhere, in a bank, invested in the stock market, but it's going to be invested. Or maybe you're going to buy an annuity. But you're going to have the money someplace, and you're going to gradually draw it down. Wherever you put it, it's going to provide a return. For example, if you put it in a bank, you could invest it in CDs, certificates of deposit. You probably want to do what's called a laddered investment, in which you put 1/5 of it in 1-year CDs, 1/5 in 2, 1/5 in 3, 1/5 in 4, and 1/5 in 5-year CDs, which are about the longest term you can buy. And then you'll get an average investment return that way of about, right now, about 2.25%. And every year, 1/5 of your money would roll over and could be reinvested, which would allow you to keep up with rising interest rates. And you would maybe get about 2.25% right now, $22,500, that you could take out without affecting your principal. Now, what about inflation? This is something else that's going to happen, and that is that every year it costs a little bit more to live. Over the last 30 years, inflation has averaged about 2.6% a year. So that means that if you want to maintain your lifestyle, you're going to need a little bit more money every year. So if you are taking out $20,000 this year, you're going to need about 2.5% more, or $20,500 next year, and so on. So every year you need to actually take out a little bit more money to keep up with inflation. Well, you can do some simple calculations that if you have your money invested and it's giving you a return of whatever, 3%, you can take out, say, $20,000 this year and increase that by 3% next year, and keep doing that. No, start over. If you decided you were only going to live for 20 years, and you could take out 1/20th of your investment the first year and increase it by the rate of return on your investment the second year, and on for 20 years, and you would pretty much have zero at the end of 20 years. That provides you with a hedge against inflation, but it does place a limit on how much money you can withdraw. But the hard part, as I said, is deciding how long you are going to live. You can never know that. Now, the other area of consideration that you need to look at to determine if you can have a comfortable retirement with $1 million in savings is how much money do you need to maintain your lifestyle? This is another very tricky question that's going to be very individual. What are some of the considerations? Well, housing. Where do you live? Do you live in San Francisco or New York? Well, in San Francisco or New York, housing costs are high, as opposed to, say, Kansas, where housing costs aren't so high. What sort of housing do you have? Do you rent an apartment or a house? Or do you own your own home? If you own your own home, do you have a mortgage that you have to pay? It's much easier to live on not so much income if you own your home outright and you don't have a mortgage. Then you only have the normal expenses of property taxes and utilities to cover Do you like to travel a lot? Well, travel is expensive. You may find that having $1 million doesn't provide you with enough to do much travel. And what about hobbies? Well, I own a boat. Boats, I can tell you, are expensive toys. So if you have expensive hobbies, or you might or might not be able to afford them on the income that $1 million in savings would generate. You might also want to consider vehicles. Do you own a car? Is a car necessary for your lifestyle? What kind of car do you own? Do you owe money on it? And how much does it cost to maintain it? Is it expensive to maintain it? Do you have to have a lot of insurance costs? Does it use a lot of gas? All of these are considerations that you need to work out. So when you're coming up on retirement and you have a fixed amount of capital to fund your retirement, you need to look at every aspect of your life and make some decisions about, can I afford my lifestyle on the amount of money that I'm likely to have when I retire? So I guess my conclusion here is that if all you have for retirement is Social Security and the income off $1 million nest egg, and you're relatively healthy and presumably are going to live for quite a while, that in today's world, if you live in an expensive part of the country and have a lot of debt, $1 million probably is not enough to have a comfortable retirement. If you live in an inexpensive part of the country, you own your vehicles outright, you own your own home, and you don't spend a lot of time on international travel, you don't have a lot of expensive hobbies, then yes, you can have a comfortable lifestyle, and you may not have to change anything about your lifestyle when you retire if you have $1 million to produce income. If you're not in good health and don't expect to live long, then that $1 million may actually provide a very comfortable income. But of course, if you're in poor health, you're going to have more health care expenses that might impact that. So, in conclusion, since I'm running out of time here, $1 million seems like a lot of money, and to many people it is a lot of money. But when you're trying to fund your life for the rest of your life, and it could be as long as 30 years, it really isn't that much. And you are most likely going to have to make changes in your lifestyle to accommodate the limitations that are going to be put on you by only having $1 million available to fund your retirement. You may find that you can have a comfortable life, or you may find, if you have an expensive lifestyle, that you're really going to have to cut back a lot. So yeah, $1 million seems like a lot, but in today's world it isn't that much, and 20 years from now, depending on what inflation does, it might buy you a cup of coffee. Okay, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give me a thumbs up, and please subscribe to my channel.